You are not who you think you are, and neither is anyone else. We've all been taught to wear masks, polite, obedient, moral, to pretend we're good people. But under those layers is something else, something primal, something that wants control, recognition, and revenge. You felt it, and so did Nietzsche. He looked around and saw the lie. Civilization isn't about progress, it's about taming. Morality isn't about truth, it's about control. Empathy, kindness, peace. They're useful myth, crafted to keep the herd from turning on itself. And the worst part? Most people never realize they've been caged. They spend their entire lives obeying instincts they won't admit they have. Living by values they didn't choose. Pretending that weakness is virtue. But Nietzsche knew. If you want to be free, you can't keep pretending. You have to confront what you are. Not what you wish you were. Not what society tells you to be. What you are, at your core. This isn't about becoming cruel. It's about becoming honest. And if that makes you uncomfortable, good. That means you're starting to wake up. If you're tired of surface-level truths and ready to confront the raw mechanics of what actually drives people, subscribe and leave a comment saying, "I'm ready to see." Let's begin. We all want to believe we're good, rational, compassionate, fair. From the moment we can speak, we're told that's what we are, that being human is something noble, that we've evolved past violence, past savagery, past instinct. It's a comforting idea. But it's also a lie. Nietzsche called it out for what it is, a convenient mask. A mask society hands us the moment we're born and forces us to wear, not because it's true, but because it keeps things orderly. Because if we ever stopped pretending, the whole illusion would collapse. You see, we weren't born good. We were born hungry, ambitious, jealous, vain. The so-called lower instincts, they were never low. They were real. And the only reason they're called bad is because someone else was afraid of them. Nietzsche didn't believe in morality as some divine truth. To him, morality was a power play, a tool. A way for the weak to survive in a world built by the strong. So instead of challenging power directly, they rewrote the rules. They said it's evil to dominate, it's virtuous to be meek, the noble are cruel, the humble are good. They flipped the story, turned their fear into a moral code, and then convinced the world that following it made you civilized. But let's be honest, most people don't act morally because they're pure-hearted. They act morally because they're afraid. Afraid of being punished, afraid of losing their reputation, afraid of being seen for what they really are. Take away the consequences, strip away the laws, the shame, the eyes watching from every corner, and watch how fast those morals vanish, how fast the good becomes cruel, how fast kindness gives way to survival. You've seen it, in others, maybe in yourself, when someone cuts you off in traffic, when someone takes credit for your work, when someone insults you in front of people you respect. There's a flash, isn't there? Something hot, sharp, ugly, but you swallow it. Because you've been taught to. You force a smile, say it's no big deal, tell yourself it doesn't matter. But Nietzsche would say that's not virtue. That's self-denial. You didn't choose to be good, you chose to submit. You put a leash on your nature and called it ethics. He saw what most people can't admit, that civilization isn't a triumph of morality, it's a strategy. A way to keep the chaos at bay by pretending it isn't there, but the chaos is still there. In every polite conversation filled with fake laughter, in every fake apology, in every smiling face that secretly wants to win, dominate, or destroy. And the worst part? We lie to ourselves about it. We believe our own act. We say we're kind when really we're calculating. We say we're fair when we're just afraid of looking selfish. We say we forgive, but we keep score. Every time. That's the lie we live inside. That's the illusion Nietzsche wanted to burn down. Because when you lie to yourself long enough, something dangerous happens. You lose track of who you are. You forget what you're capable of. You forget how much of your life is controlled by fear. Not wisdom, not goodness. Fear of being judged. Fear of being alone. Fear of being seen for what you really are. Not evil, not broken, just human. But that kind of honesty, it terrifies people. because it means admitting that all the things we were told to suppress, ambition, anger, pride, lust, they're not defects. They're part of us. Essential. Alive. And if you can't face them, if you spend your whole life trying to bury them, you're not moral, you're just numb. You become passive, soft, tamed, not because you chose to be, but because the fear trained you to be. Nietzsche didn't write for the tame. He wrote for those who were sick of the act, for those who could feel the lie stretching thin, for those who sensed deep down that they were meant for something more than obedience. He didn't ask you to become a monster. He asked you to stop pretending you're not one, to stop denying the parts of yourself that want more control, more freedom, more life. Because here's the truth no one tells you. Suppressing your instincts doesn't make them disappear. It just makes you weaker than them. And the longer you pretend, the more they control you from the shadows. That's how most people live. Not awake, not empowered, but controlled. By instincts they refuse to name and values they never chose. You deserve better than that. But to get there, you have to do the hardest thing of all. Not fight the world. Not fight others. You have to stop lying to yourself. You have to look in the mirror and say, I am not who they told me I was. I am not a servant of someone else's morality. I am not ashamed of my will to live, to win, to rise. That's the first step. Not to reject morality outright, but to understand where it came from and why it was given to you in the first place. Because if you don't understand the lie, you'll never see the cage. And if you don't see the cage, you'll never break out of it. So you've started to see it. The lie we live. The mask we wear. And maybe for the first time you're starting to ask questions, not the kind you're supposed to ask, but the real ones. The dangerous ones. Like, what even is morality? Where did it come from? Who decided what's good and what's evil? And why does it always seem to reward obedience and punish power? Nietzsche asked those same questions. But unlike most people, he didn't flinch at the answers. He realized that morality wasn't just about right and wrong. It wasn't some timeless truth handed down by gods or philosophers. It was a survival tactic, a strategy. Not for everyone, but for the weak. And before that sounds harsh, sit with this. There's no shame in being weak. Everyone is at some point. But what Nietzsche refused to do, what he hated, was lying about it. Calling weakness virtue. Calling fear righteousness. That's how he divided morality into two forms, slave morality and master morality. Two completely different worldviews, two ways of looking at life, power, and yourself. Let's start with master morality. This is the morality of the strong, the noble, the self-directed. To them, good doesn't mean humble or obedient. It means powerful, creative, full of life. They don't ask for permission. They don't apologize for existing. They act, and they own the consequences. They see pride not as a sin, but as a sign that you know your worth. They see ambition not as dangerous, but as natural. They don't pretend to be less than they are to make others comfortable. But then came the other morality. Slave morality. This wasn't created by the strong. It was created by those who had no power, the ones who were conquered, ruled, controlled. They couldn't fight back. So they rewrote the rules. They took the things they feared, strength, dominance, confidence, and called them evil. And they took the traits they were forced to embody, obedience, humility, submission, and called them good. It was psychological warfare. And it worked. Because now, the people with the most power weren't the ones who could fight. They were the ones who seemed the most morally pure. The ones who suffered the most. The ones who endured the most without pushing back. That's slave morality. It teaches you to value being small, to equate self-denial with virtue, to make yourself easier to manage, then call that being a good person. And here's the trap. Most of us were raised with slave morality and didn't even realize it. We were told it's noble to be modest, to not want too much, to always put others first, to turn the other cheek. But stop and ask yourself, how many of those values actually serve you? How many of them are keeping you afraid, passive, or dependent? How many are just shields you picked up to avoid punishment, rejection, or failure? It's a hard pill to swallow, because morality feels personal. It feels like your identity. But Nietzsche wanted you to ask, did you choose your values, or were they chosen for you? Were they taught to you by people who wanted to protect you? Or by people who wanted to control you? Because if morality is just a survival strategy, you have to ask, whose survival, yours, or the system's? But compliant people? They do what they're told. They feel guilty when they don't. They believe that playing small makes them noble. That's how morality became a tool for control. Not through force, but through shame. You were taught to feel bad for wanting more. More freedom, more power, more of yourself. You were told that's selfish, that it's dangerous, that it's wrong. But Nietzsche didn't see it that way. To him, the real danger wasn't selfishness, it was self-rejection. He saw a world where people had been trained to betray their instincts, to feel ashamed of their strength, and to live their whole lives trying to be less than they are. And the result? A society full of quiet resentment. People smiling on the outside, but bitter, envious, hollow on the inside, because they sacrificed who they could have been to fit into a morality they never chose. But here's the twist. Nietzsche wasn't telling you to be cruel. He wasn't glorifying domination or saying you should become some cartoon villain. He was saying this: if you don't wake up, you'll mistake your cage for a crown. You'll think your submission is sainthood. You'll think your fear is morality. And you'll never realize how much of your life has been controlled by ideas designed to keep you harmless. So here's the question. How much of your identity is built on fear, not abstract fear, but very specific fears? Fear of being seen as arrogant, fear of being disliked, fear of standing out, fear of wanting too much, fear of being you. And how many of your so-called virtues are just ways of avoiding that fear? You're polite because you don't want to be judged. You're humble because you don't want to fail. You're forgiving because you're afraid of confrontation. You're selfless, but it's killing you inside. You were taught that's what it means to be good. But Nietzsche says maybe that's not goodness, maybe that's fear in disguise. And if you can see that, if you can really see it, something incredible happens. You stop living reactively. You stop letting other people's values define your worth. You stop playing a role you didn't audition for. Instead, you start creating, choosing, reclaiming. That doesn't mean throwing morality in the trash. It means recognizing what's true and what's training. It means asking, what kind of person do I actually want to be? Not the one your parents wanted. Not the one your school taught you to become. Not the one your culture said was safe or appropriate. But you, unmasked, undiluted, unapologetic. Because in Nietzsche's world, that's where real morality begins. Not with obedience, but with authenticity. Not with submission, but with self-knowledge. And once you have that, you can create your own values. Not as a reaction to fear, but as an expression of who you really are. So you've peeled back the layers. You've started to see how morality might not be truth, but strategy. Not chosen, but inherited. Not yours, but theirs. But now comes the hard part. Because even if you reject the lies, even if you stop pretending to be small, you still have to face what's beneath the mask. And that part? That's where most people stop. Because what's underneath isn't clean. It's not polite. It's not Instagram friendly. It's what Nietzsche and later Jung recognized as the shadow. The parts of yourself you've disowned, the impulses you buried, the urges you weren't allowed to feel, the anger, the lust, the jealousy, the hunger for power, the violent thoughts you'd never say out loud, the part of you that doesn't want to forgive, the part of you that wants to win no matter the cost. You think you're peaceful because you avoid confrontation? Nietzsche would call that cowardice, not virtue. He'd say you're not above the darkness. You're just too afraid to look it in the eye. And when you're afraid of something, you give it control. That's what most people miss. The things you repress don't disappear. They fester. You lock them in the basement, sure, but they grow teeth and claws. And eventually, they start leaking out. You see it in the way people sabotage themselves. In the quiet addictions they swear they've got under control. In the way they explode at the wrong time over something small, because they've been swallowing rage for years. In how someone who says they're just kind and generous always ends up resenting everyone they give to. That's not peace. That's rot. And it starts the moment you pretend you're above your darker instincts. Nietzsche didn't want you to act on every impulse. He wasn't saying go around punching people or give in to every craving. What he was saying is this: if you refuse to look at your own darkness, it'll run your life from the shadows. You'll think you're making conscious choices, but you're just reacting to whatever you've denied. You'll think you're being good when you're just being afraid. You'll think you're in control when your buried instincts are pulling the strings. Because here's the truth: you are capable of evil. Every single one of us is. And pretending otherwise doesn't make it go away. It just makes you blind to it. That's why Nietzsche's philosophy is so uncomfortable. Because it doesn't let you hide behind "I'm a good person." It asks, what are you hiding from yourself to maintain that image? Most people don't want to know. They'd rather keep lying. It's easier to say "I'm just nice" than to admit, "I suppress so much rage that it turns inward and becomes depression." Or, "I don't speak up, not because I'm peaceful, but because I'm scared to lose approval." Or, "I don't want success to come easy for others because deep down I'm bitter that I don't have it myself." These aren't comfortable truths, but they're honest. And Nietzsche thought honesty, real, brutal honesty, was more sacred than virtue. Because once you see the shadow, you can stop being manipulated by it. You can stop pretending that certain feelings make you a bad person. You can stop putting your urges in a mental cage and acting surprised when they break out. You can start understanding why you feel what you feel. And that's when power returns. Not power over others, but power over yourself. Think about this. Most people live in reaction. They're triggered by things they don't understand. They overreact. They self-sabotage. They hurt people, then they apologize, then they do it again because they're not driving the car. They're being driven by what they've repressed. Nietzsche's answer wasn't to kill the shadow. It was to integrate it, to know what you're capable of, to admit what lives inside you. To hold it in your hands, not with shame, but with clarity. That's when you become dangerous in the right way. Not destructive, not cruel, but aware, and aware people are hard to control. See, most systems, religion, culture, even polite conversation, depend on repression. They work best when people are scared of their instincts, because then they're predictable, easy to guilt, easy to manage. But someone who's owned their darkness, you can't shame them into silence. You can't weaponize their guilt. You can't make them shrink, because they've already seen the worst in themselves and made peace with it. That's what Nietzsche meant when he talked about becoming the Übermensch, the higher person. Not a superhero, not a conqueror, but someone who's moved beyond inherited values and built their own. And that journey always goes through the shadow, because you can't build a real self on top of denial. Let me ask you something. Have you ever hated someone you weren't allowed to hate? Someone you were supposed to forgive, but couldn't? That's the shadow. Have you ever wanted something that made you feel guilty? A relationship, a job, a lifestyle. That's the shadow. Have you ever smiled while secretly hoping someone failed? That's the shadow too. It's not evil. It's human. And unless you're willing to confront it, you'll never really know who you are. You'll spend your life pretending, wearing masks, acting how you think a good person should act. And all the while, the shadow waits. Nietzsche believed that freedom isn't found in perfection. It's found in truth. And the truth is, you are not a pure being. You are not a walking saint. You are not immune to envy, cruelty, selfishness, lust, rage. But the difference between those who grow and those who stay stuck is that the former own it. They name it. They face it. And eventually, they harness it. Because the shadow, when integrated, becomes strength. Your rage becomes boundaries. Your envy becomes direction. Your fear becomes awareness. Your pride becomes backbone. The parts of you that once sabotaged your life can start protecting it, but only if you stop running. Only if you look in the mirror and say, I know what's inside me, and I'm not afraid of it anymore. Because here's the final warning Nietzsche leaves us with. You are not in control of what you refuse to see. It will show up in your relationships, in your work, in your dreams, in your vices. It will twist you. It will break things. And you'll blame everything but the one thing you're terrified to admit. That darkness lives in you too, and that's not a curse. It's a door. Open it, and you stop living someone else's story. You start writing your own. You've seen the shadow. You've stopped pretending. You've begun to reclaim the darker parts of yourself, the ones that give you strength, not shame. But there's one more enemy to face. Not inside you, out there. The herd. See, Nietzsche believed that the final battle, the one that decides whether you'll ever live as a free person, doesn't happen in your head. It happens the moment you stand alone, because the world doesn't like people who don't fit in. It says it does. Be yourself. Think outside the box, all those cute slogans. But that's surface-level permission. The second you actually challenge what the group believes, the second you stop nodding and smiling and following the same path everyone else is on, they turn on you. Nietzsche called it the herd instinct. The primal urge to blend in, to submit, to dissolve into the crowd, to be safe. And safety has a cost. You give up your identity. You trade it for approval. You see it everywhere. Same careers, same opinions, same outrage cycles. Same fake smiles at parties you don't want to be at. Most people don't think. They recycle. They're not asking why they believe what they believe. They're just doing what everyone else is doing and hoping that's enough to feel okay. And Nietzsche hated this. Not because he thought he was better than other people, but because he knew what they could be if they stopped trying to belong. He saw the tragedy. Most human potential dies in the crowd. People are born unique. They die copies. He said the individual is the only place truth can live, because truth doesn't survive consensus. The moment an idea becomes popular, it starts rotting. It gets simplified, packaged, marketed, approved, and at that point, it's no longer a threat. But the individual, the one who refuses to follow the script, they're dangerous, and society always punishes danger. Look back through history. Every thinker who challenged the herd was called arrogant, delusional, evil. Socrates, Galileo, Nietzsche himself. It says, who do you think you are? And if you can't handle that, if you still need their applause, you'll fold, you'll shrink. You'll retreat back into their arms just to feel warm again. But that warmth is poison, because it comes with a price tag. Your mind, your truth, your power. And Nietzsche was clear about this. You cannot become yourself while needing to belong. You cannot create if you're afraid of being misunderstood. You cannot rise if you still crave comfort. That's what separates the herd from the individual. The herd wants to be accepted. The individual wants to be free. And those two things, they rarely happen at the same time. So ask yourself, how much of your personality is real? And how much of it was shaped by what you thought others wanted from you? How many of your opinions are yours? And how many were downloaded from the people around you? Do you believe what you believe because you thought it through? Or because everyone else around you said it was right? Nietzsche's entire philosophy was a war against automatic thinking. He wanted you to burn everything down and rebuild it from scratch, your way. Destroying borrowed truth so that something real could emerge. But you can't do that if you still care about fitting in. Because the herd has rules, unspoken ones. You're allowed to be smart, but not so smart that you threaten anyone. You're allowed to be confident, but not so confident that it's uncomfortable. You're allowed to succeed, but not in a way that makes others feel small. You're allowed to speak your mind, but only if it matches the collective script. Step outside that and watch how fast the smiles turn to scowls. That's the test. And Nietzsche believed the ones who pass that test are rare, because they have to be willing to walk alone, to be hated, to be misquoted, to be called crazy. He said, you must be willing to burn in your own flame. Most people aren't. They want comfort too much. They want connection, even if it means censorship. They'd rather be loved by others than be honest with themselves, and that's the tragedy. Because once you bend to the herd, you don't come back the same. You start self-editing. You speak in safer tones. You bury your edge. You become agreeable and invisible. You blend so well that eventually, you don't even know where the mask ends and you begin. But Nietzsche? He chose the opposite. Isolation. Misunderstanding. Mockery. They called him mad. They dismissed him. He died alone. But he never lied to fit in. He never watered himself down for likes. He never betrayed his mind just to be embraced by people who didn't think. And maybe that's the price of real freedom. You don't get applause, you don't get comfort. You don't get community, at least not in the usual sense, but what you do get is yourself. You get your own mind uncensored. You get your truth unfiltered. You get to think what's real, not what's safe, and that's the kind of strength nobody can take from you. Not your boss, not your friends, not the algorithm, not the mob. It's the kind of strength that makes people uncomfortable, because it doesn't need validation. It doesn't need approval. It doesn't even need to be liked. It just is. And once you have that, once you've tasted what it's like to live as yourself, not a reflection, there's no going back. The herd will keep calling. They'll say it's lonely out there. They'll say it's dangerous. They'll say you'll be happier if you just let it go, but you'll know better. You'll remember what Nietzsche knew, that the crowd is not a place of truth. It's a graveyard of potential. And if you want to live, really live, you have to risk being alone, because that's where the real ones are. Not in the center, not in the echo chamber, but out on the edges, bleeding, thinking, becoming. So now you know. You know what's under the surface. The fear, the lies, the instincts we pretend we've outgrown. You've seen the masks. You've seen the herd. And maybe for the first time, you've seen yourself. Now comes the question Nietzsche cared about more than anything. What will you do with that truth? See, a lot of people think Nietzsche was just about tearing things down, breaking illusions, destroying morality, calling out weakness, but that's only half the picture. He didn't just want you to reject the old world. He wanted you to build something stronger in its place, not just stronger people, but a stronger kind of person. He called it the Übermensch, the overman, the one who rises beyond the human as we know it, not because of some magical power, not because of superintelligence or status or muscles, but because he creates his own values. He's not a slave to fear, not a puppet of society, not a product of guilt or tradition or somebody else's rules. He looks at all the chaos of human nature, the ego, the anger, the lust, the hunger for power, and he doesn't flinch. He doesn't deny it. He doesn't bury it. He shapes it, like a sculptor with a block of stone. See, the Übermensch isn't moral in the way religion defines it. He's not obedient, he's not humble. He doesn't strive to be seen as good, because goodness for him isn't something handed down from above. It's something he defines for himself. He builds his values from the ground up. He chooses who he is, and he owns it, completely. You want to know real power? It's not money. It's not control over others. It's not reputation or legacy. It's the ability to stand in front of your own instincts, your darkness, your hunger, your chaos, and not be afraid, not suppress them, not justify them. Just face them like a man facing a storm and say, I see you, but I decide what you become. That's the Übermensch, not a perfect man, a man who chooses. Most people never get there. They stay trapped. Some are still living as slaves, afraid of what others think, afraid to disobey, afraid to want more than they're told they deserve. Others think they've escaped, but they're still reacting, still defining themselves in opposition to what they hate, still stuck in cycles of rebellion, which is just another form of dependence. The Übermensch isn't reacting. He's not rebelling anymore. He's building. He doesn't need applause. He doesn't need permission. He doesn't even need to be understood. He just is. He doesn't strive to be good in the way society defines it, because he knows that definition was built by the weak to keep the strong from waking up. Instead, he strives to be honest. And then, he strives to be great. This isn't about being cruel. It's about being free. It's about asking, if I weren't bound by fear, if I didn't care what anyone thought, if I faced every dark urge inside me without blinking, what kind of man could I become? And here's the part nobody tells you. This path doesn't feel like heroism. It feels like isolation. It feels like walking through fire every day. It feels like carrying a weight no one else can see. Because you can't become the Übermensch by accident. You don't stumble into it. You forge it, moment by moment, battle by battle. When you choose discipline over indulgence. When you choose truth over comfort. When you stop blaming the world and start sculpting yourself, that's the difference. The herd blames. The Übermensch builds. The herd wants to be saved. The Übermensch saves himself. The herd says, why me? The Übermensch says, because I can. He doesn't seek approval because he knows most people can't approve of what they don't understand. He knows they'll call it selfish, or arrogant, or dangerous, and he accepts that. Because greatness has always looked dangerous to people who are still living in cages. But here's the thing. The Übermensch doesn't hate the herd. He just doesn't belong to it. He doesn't waste time proving his worth to people who can't see it. He doesn't waste breath explaining what they were never meant to understand. He simply walks forward, alone if he has to, and others, if they're ready, might follow. But that's not the point. The point is becoming what you are, fully, boldly, dangerously. And the only way to do that is to take everything in you, the strength, the ego, the rage, the hunger, and own it. Not act it out blindly. Not bury it under fake smiles. But channel it. Refine it. Direct it like a weapon in service of something you chose. That's how you rise. Not by pretending to be pure. Not by erasing your instincts. But by mastering them. Because what Nietzsche understood and what most people miss is that you cannot rise above human nature by ignoring it. You rise by confronting it. By grabbing it with both hands, wrestling it to the ground and turning it into art. Turning it into greatness. Turning it into you. Not the version of you that was shaped by school or your parents or the internet or whatever the hell society pumped into you. The real you. The one beneath all that. The one that could have been a monster, but chose to be something more. And here's the final truth. If you've made it this far, if you've listened to everything and still stayed with me, you might not be like most people. Maybe you're not afraid of the dark anymore. Maybe you're ready to use it. Maybe you're ready to build something only you can build. And if you are, then you don't need a blueprint, you just need to begin. Human nature is not pretty, it's not noble by default. It's not peaceful or fair or gentle, it's violent, it's jealous. It's hungry for power, for control, for more. You can paint over it. You can dress it up in virtue and smile politely at dinner parties. But it's still there underneath the surface, breathing, and pretending it doesn't exist. That doesn't make you civilized. It just makes you blind. Nietzsche wasn't trying to make you cruel. He wasn't telling you to become some heartless machine. He was trying to rip the blindfold off. Because the moment you admit what you are, you can choose to be something more. Not out of guilt. Not because someone told you to, but because you decided to rise anyway. And that's the difference. Most people avoid their darkness because they think it makes them bad. But Nietzsche saw it as raw material, unshaped, unrefined, untamed. And if you've got the strength to look at it, not run from it, not hide behind excuses, but look at it, you're already doing what most people never will. The goal isn't to become perfect. It's to become honest. And from there, powerful. So don't reject your nature. Master it. That's what Nietzsche was pointing to. Not obedience, not purity, strength, clarity, creation. He didn't want you to be a monster. He wanted you to recognize the monster, so you could rise above it consciously with your eyes open, with your will intact, not because someone told you to be good, but because you decided to become great. If this shook something in you, don't walk away from it, sit with it. Then when you're ready, comment below. I see it now. Subscribe if you want more than just comfort. Subscribe if you want truth that cuts deep and stays with you. And remember, the strongest ones aren't the ones who deny their nature. They're the ones who master it.